I know I promised the Stormlight Archive. We're working on it. It's going to happen, so help me God. But not this episode. Welcome to the Mind Duck Books podcast episode Ender's Game. It was bound to happen. Thanks for joining me, Paul.
Thanks.
This episode was inevitable. This is one of my all-time favorite, not books, but series. Definitely the most beloved series from my childhood and in my life. And volume and enjoyment-wise, Orson Scott Card is definitely the writer I've read the most of by any means. Any way you look at it, I've read most of his stuff. This is
You're
your
not gonna
first...
like me at the end of this.
I'm very curious about your criticism. So this is the first book from him you read?
Yes, it is. And I knew about it. I've heard a lot about it. This book is considered very highly in sci-fi literature, I guess.
Which is strange, because I think the series is the highly considered thing. The first book is kind of okay, like it's nice, but it's not like amazing. And what people actually enjoy, I think so, is the whole thing, because to me the whole thing is amazing. The first part is like, for me, it's a good sci-fi book, but the second and third and fourth part is what make it, for me, the best like series I personally like and enjoy.
Okay, that gives me a bit of hope. I'm committing. I'm gonna have so many people coming after me after this because I didn't like this book.
I was expecting it very much, so I
really?
reread this.
Okay.
I've read this many times. This is a book that helped me speak English, by the way. This is one of the first English books I've ever read.
Sure.
I've reread this maybe 4 or 5 times, and it's been a long time since I touched this. I think the last time I touched this was when the movie came out, which is already 10 years ago.
Yeah, I was wondering as well, like, is this book kind of like targeted for like young teens or something?
That's what I didn't know, but yes.
Okay. All right, because I was just like, I didn't enjoy this at all.
That's exactly what I was expecting you to say, because I remembered something completely different coming into this than what I read.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering as well, because I was like, is this just me? That I'm somehow like an outlier here? Because when I went through other people's reviews, they're like, yeah, they had fond memories of reading this when they were like young, and when they went back and reread it, they're like, yeah.
There are many elements why this is popular, and we'll talk about them in depth. But I just want to say, everybody has their own young adult fiction, something they get off on, and get off at or get off from, which is the correct preposition here. I don't know.
Enjoy.
Yeah, they just get off on it, and this was mine.
Okay.
You got your Hunger Games and Maze Runners, and the funniest to me is Detergent, because I always say Detergent because there is Divergent and then there's Insurgent, and it's so dumb, like all the stories. And this one, I dare to say, is not dumb. Would you think so?
I have issues with it, and there's numerous issues with it. It's not dumb. It's just I'll go into it later. But
okay.
The characters, the plotting, the twist, basically everything. I have problems with it.
So sorry.
If I wasn't doing this podcast, I think I wouldn't have finished the book.
Oh no.
I'm sorry,
Even
everyone.
worse than I thought.
As I said, everyone's going to be coming at me. Oh no.
I want to quickly ask, which was your adult drama in your childhood? Do you remember something like that?
Yeah, I was trying to think actually about that. No, I grew up reading things like Silence of the Lambs and Red Dragon. My mother would read these books and she's like, "Here, read this." And I'm like a 13-year-old boy reading fucking people getting like shoved into a well to get like to
I see how it is.
Yeah.
I see what happened.
Yes, it's like haunted. Oh, this is fun. Yeah, so. Yeah, I wasn't given any kind of like young adult teenage literature. I was just fed like fucked up shit.
So I read this when I was, I don't know how old, but it was elementary school, which Czech elementary school is until 15 years old. And then I read the whole series in high school, and it was the first like major series of books that I got into. Now it's 20 books altogether, and I loved it like so hard. And then I read the second book, and I was like, what the fuck? This is not, I don't want this. And then I read it, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, it's a completely different way than and then the third book was again like a completely different point of view. and then there is like a parallel series of books that's a different point of view, and I really appreciate that each of the books is completely different. Like not all of them, but mainly the series.
I'm willing to give it like a second chance.
Okay.
If the second book is somehow radically different, I might read it.
Yeah, so the second book was supposed to be the only book because he wrote a short story in 1967, and then he wrote like the novella in 1977, and then he started working on The Speaker for the Dead, which is the second in the series, and this was like the book he wanted to write, and he wanted to have like a setup at the start of this book, and he didn't want to waste space, so he made the setup into a different book. And then he made a bunch of stuff around it just for fun, like all the dreams and all the fights and all the like battle school. So all the details that were in that one was just him writing for fun and making like a, I guess, adult novel. And that was supposed to build up this character that's the main thing that he wanted to write about in the second book.
Oh, okay.
Which is kind of interesting. Today we'll talk about Ender's Game, and hopefully I won't rave too much because I'm a big fanboy of this. Like I said, after having reread it, I don't think it's as good as I remember by far.
Oh, okay.
I have to say it. I think I probably, like to you, I wouldn't recommend this after I have reread it.
No, I was just like, especially like after like something rereading like Starship Troopers.
Yeah, this is an adult, like young adult. It's not like a thought-provoking thing or anything.
No, not at all. It was a struggle for me.
I still have to say that I appreciate like the elements I'll talk about, I'm sure, too much.
Okay.
And I wasn't bored. I was just like expecting to rekindle my fascination with this series, and that's not this one.
Is there any particular book in the series that you would consider like the highlight or something?
I like the fourth one, The
Okay.
Children of the Mind, which this is, I think, a trilogy, because the first book is not supposed to be a book. It's a short story, Ender's Game. The second book was what we was planning, and then the third book is like the big final like story, but it's too long. And Xenocide and Children of the Mind are split into. It's supposed to be one book. I like the very last one.
Okay. For you, Philip, I'll
was-
give it another a try.
I was about to do like a super promotion. This is amazing. We're gonna give away an audiobook, and after this we can't do that. So I'll wait.
Wait until we get to a book that we actually both love.
But this one has a special audio edition. So we already talked about Orson Scott Card on the second episode of this podcast, which is very underappreciated. Nobody listened to that, and it's one of my
listened to it.
all-time short stories. Thank you. Would it make you read that short story?
Yeah, it would actually.
Some people read it. Like I think actually like many people who listened to it, which is not many, told me they read it afterwards because it's super short, and they liked it. So he can write. Trust me, Orson Scott Card.
Yeah, I have doubts about that actually after reading this.
So I want to talk a bit about him. When I was growing up and reading all these books, I never cared, and I never knew, and I never even found anything until much later, because I was reading it when at the time there was no internet and no way to find. And then I finally saw him like talk, like after years of reading his books, and I was like surprised. I'm not sure what to start with, but
Well, actually, I wanted to ask you something. Actually,
Yeah.
like you've read a lot of his books, and it's quite well established that he's a Mormon. Or do you ever notice any kind of religious overtones with these books?
never.
Okay.
That's one of my notes here. I heard comments about the Ender's Game being like the perfect, what do you call that, conversion, like in indoctrination. Like
No way. No,
like,
no.
I don't see anything in the Ender's Game about any religion at all. He wrote a series about Alvin Maker that I read.
Okay.
The whole thing, and that's kind of religious. Like there is a religion in the story, but I never felt like anybody's preaching anything to me, so I wouldn't say anything like that. So Orson Scott Card is a Mormon, and he was a missionary in Brazil. He also went to Portugal. He can speak fluent Portuguese, and a lot of his stories are influenced by Portuguese culture, like especially in the Ender series. And he also started his own sci-fi magazine called the Intergalactic Medicine Show, which was the only thing online I've ever bought ever when the internet like was available. It's like a subscription, a monthly magazine where he picks starting writers, sci-fi stories, and he just puts them together and releases it for, I don't know, like $3 or something. It was like nothing.
Okay.
And also, the first time you bought it, you could have downloaded all of the previous issues, so you bought all of them for nothing. It finished in 2019, but it was running for many, many years. And it's pretty fun. I'd recommend it. If you want to try, like, if you want to find, like, a new writer that you want to try, how they experiment with new stories. He also wrote a blog or like a review column called Uncle Orson Reviews Everything that I've been following for a long time. And he was just writing basically a few pages about what happened, like media-wise, movie-wise, music-wise, whatever the hell he just wanted to talk about.
I wish Heinlein did that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have been perfect. Uncle Heinlein tells you how it is.
I would love that so much. I would actually like to find a writer who's currently doing that and somebody who has this kind of insight. I miss it. He stopped doing that. He also had a podcast with his friend that I listened to, all of that. And I really appreciate his insight into like the character arc building and all this. He has very good points about movies and he can tell them shortly and point out like issues. I like it.
Did you ever watch the movie?
Ender's Game?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually rewatched like half of it yesterday. And yes, of course, I was very excited.
Okay.
I have a quick note about the movie. I guess I can say just now.
Was it a success? You know,
it was like
commercially
mediocre. It was commercially okay. It didn't flop.
Okay.
But nobody really cared.
Okay. Because I just, when I was looking at, I saw something that came up there about Harrison Ford being asked his opinion of Orson Scott Card and his opinions, and I'm sure Harrison Ford probably didn't give a fuck either. Actually, it's like, as long as they're paying me, I'll show up. And
I think Harrison Ford was so fed up with everything, and this was his chance to be like in a new sci-fi something.
Yeah.
He was really hoping that this would be like the new like popular thing, and he would be like the new character that's not Star Wars. So he gave a good performance. I liked him in the movie.
Okay. I guess he was the character
Graf.
Oh, okay.
Hiram Graf.
I was thinking of the other one.
Yeah, Maze Rackham.
Maze Rackham, yes.
He's played by a New Zealandian guy, I forget.
Oh, really?
It's a famous actor. And it's really funny because he's got the facial tattoos and he has a very thick New Zealand accent.
No, that's
he's very famous, the actor. I forget his name.
Ben Kingsley?
Yeah, Ben Kingsley, that's it.
Yeah, the British guy.
It's pretty cool in the movie too. Like all the actors are pretty cool in the movie.
Okay.
The children needed to be much younger, but it's impossible. And he was trying to make this movie work since, I don't know, like 1990s. And he was getting offers for making an adaptation. And they would always tell him two conditions: that the child actor has to be at least 16 and that there has to be a love interest. And he kept refusing and refusing and refusing. And he got like, I don't know, 5 offers. And then finally he agreed in 2013, the movie came out. And he was like, finally somebody's going to give you a chance. They're gonna have the children younger. The main lead actor's gonna be like 12 years old and there's gonna be no love interest. And I googled how old was Asa Butterfield, is the main actor who plays Ender, at the time of filming. 16.
Yeah, of course. Well, you can't get an actor that's leading a movie at like 12 or beyond.
There is a character, Petra, in the story who doesn't have any love interest at all, and she's the love interest in the movie, so they broke him. It happened. But it wasn't that bad. It was like, the movie is like, if you've read the book and you love it, you'll enjoy the movie. If you never watch it, for people who don't know the book, they'll probably be like, whatever, like, it's okay. I actually really liked it because I'm a big fan. I was like excited, and especially the dreams depictions and all this, like the fights in the battle school, I think were pretty cool. But other than that, they cut out the things I like from the movie. Like, obviously you cannot have the depth of the character in a short movie.
What depth?
Yes, I was waiting for you to say this.
What action scenes? It's just like, what are you talking about?
I'm trying to find something positive and then promote this fucking audiobook. I'm gonna finally say this. So he made a script, and they wouldn't take it for the movie because it was too long. But then he hired a bunch of professional voice actors, and they made a special edition called Ender's Game Alive, which is a full cast audiobook. I love it. It's awesome. It's like what the movie should be. It's basically the same like the book, but acted like a movie, and it's, I think, 4 hours or something. Maybe 6 hours. It's not very long, and it's if this movie was a trilogy and it was filmed in this way, it could have been great. But then again, maybe not so much, because I was just an excited teenager. So I wanted to give you a list of things why I like this so much.
Can I
wanted you just
retort?
You can, of course. So maybe then you can give me a list why you hate this, or
this list.
But what I want to do just quickly is like tell me you agree or disagree with this, like yes or no.
Okay.
And I mean this not only about this book, but just why I like Orson Scott Card's writing. I like it because he doesn't describe. He says it himself. He does world building and character building without having long descriptions of stuff. Like if you remember the places or the fights or I don't know the characters, they never talk about who they are, what they are like, what it looks like, but it always feels like you can imagine it.
So you're technically correct, but it's just I think the other writers that I like, they, especially someone like Heinlein, they kind of do a similar thing, but they just give you just enough that you can kind of imagine. Where I felt like Card doesn't give you enough. No, nothing. That's why I didn't care. I didn't give a fuck about the characters.
Okay.
I was just like, I don't care about you. You're just a fucking.
Okay.
I'll drop kick you, little
Just a fucking
prick.
I was waiting for this. You didn't disappoint. Okay, so other point. There are no flashbacks, no gimmicks to tell the story. Like it's just a straight, very well-paced story.
Flashback to what? They're like 6 years old.
There could be flashbacks to Mazer Rackham or whatever.
That would have been better. Actually, I would have loved to know more about him. He seemed like an interesting character. I'm far more interested in this grumpy old bastard who somehow defeated the bugs. I wanted to know something about these buggers.
Something. I want to know something about
Just keep hearing buggers, and I was like, I'm waiting for the bugs.
Yeah, so just to not a spoiler, the rest of the series in the Ender saga is mostly bugs. So you'll get the bugs if you continue reading. So other point I have here is it's creative, but at the same time, like even when it's predictable, I think we both say this book is kind of predictable. It's still creative, like what happens and how it happens. I like the ideas that they come up with the battle scenes, like what kind of strategy they use. I like the dreams and how they communicate to each other without any spoilers. Yeah, and I like the game that he plays in the school.
That was so hard to get through. This is so repetitive. It just going on and on. That was the hardest part.
This was one of my favorite parts.
Now we're going to do 2 games, and now you're going to have this sort of...
I don't mean that game. I mean the mind game.
Oh, the puzzle game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't care by that point.
Yeah, we know. So, other point, I guess I'll just finish. I have too many of these.
Oh, go on. I have lots to say.
Well, I really like the way it changes your perspective. Like, even though this is a young adult book, even though it puts you to sleep, even though you didn't care about anything, they have to admit there are some ideas that are like changing how you think about something. Like the most obvious one is the which is your point of orientation as regards to gravity. Like, if there's no gravity, there's no up and all this. I never saw that taken into consideration in any space fights.
Yeah.
Like, people never talk about that. And he said the inspiration for that was the biggest problem with pilots and training pilots is if they are attacked from the bottom or from above, they never defend themselves. And training a military person or a soldier to consider other than front, back, left, right is very difficult, and that's why they need the children to be trained in that way as soon as possible so they can think in a different way as far as space is considered.
He writes it in a way that, I mean, I'm going back to Heinlein again, where Heinlein obviously is a military man and it comes through the writing, but not in a way that it's inaccessible. Where this guy, I felt like just explaining it to me in a way that I just didn't grab my interest at all.
Okay.
Why do you have to explain this to me like 5 times?
But that's the whole point of the exercise. Like,
but it's repetitive.
It's like obvious, but I don't know. At the time I read it, I was like, I wouldn't think of this.
Because you're a kid.
I would have to. Okay.
Sorry.
So last point. Let's just stop my.
No, let's keep going.
My favorite thing about this as a series is, I already said, each book is so different. The series, I have to say this because this is like hopefully saving grace of this episode that people might still read this. Like I said, the second book jumps in time, like similar to Dune, which you don't like.
I haven't read it.
But in
all I know of Dune is these worms that produce cocaine, and all the families want cocaine.
So like an aspect of Dune I really love, and I also really love about this series, is it doesn't get bogged down with the... It's not trying to please you, like, with stuff. Like, there's a character...
Sorry.
I mean, so they take a character, and it's the main character, and then you're supposed to you know, like usually in this series, you have a character, follow my character, and it's like a million books, and you just so they take the character, and it's a completely different person in the next book, like in both Dune and this one.
Well, that'll be more interesting, I think. I hope.
And it's like, oh my god. So what I really appreciate is it's a completely different perspective on the issue. Like the first book gives you a story, and you like it, you don't like it, whatever. And the second book paints it in a completely different light, completely changes your perspective. That's what I meant about the other point, that is completely changing like what you think about things. This is why I enjoy it, because it puts it in a different mindset, or puts you in a different mindset. Same with Dune, like every of the book jumps so much forward in time, and so many crazy things happen that it's a completely different thing, place, character, setting, but it's still the same, and the characters have to deal with it somehow. That's very interesting to me. That's why
I thought June, you said you had to listen to a podcast to help you get through it or something.
Yeah, that's true. I hated it. Like
maybe you should start an End the Game podcast by yourself.
That's what I was trying to do, but now you killed it.
You said to me the other night, like, I would love to reread the whole series. I'm like, yeah, be doing it by yourself, buddy. I'm not fucking doing this. I can't. Unless it dramatically changes. I don't know. What's the other point that you love about us?
I think I've said enough. So what's the bad point?
Firstly, the writing is just dull. It's so pedestrian.
Oh, okay.
It's so nothing hooks you. At the beginning I was slightly intrigued with the character and the world, but it just didn't bring me in. The other point, the characters, it just didn't give me enough that I even cared about them. And there's almost even like a Gary Stew. He's so brilliant. Everything he does, he wins everything. He's so amazing. He's brilliant. He hacks computers. He's a fucking 6-year-old. I just can't get it. The other thing I had an issue with was the other brother and sister who start like blogging on the interwebs or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
And it's like, aren't people on the internet already like delusional enough that the brother somehow takes over the world with his fucking blogs? It's just like, I can't fucking buy this at all.
It's fucking you're already like
yeah, I know,
but
I mean, I just like, what? That part was interesting though. The whole like, this is 1985 and he's already talking about kind of people blogging and stuff like this and influencing stuff. Yeah. I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting, but I don't get how it kind of works into the plot, and I didn't get how he.
It all feels to me like a giant setup, because this is a huge element in the series when the series continues. Like this is just a touch. I almost feel like this was a touch to put there so he can like have it set up later. Like this whole book feels to me almost like a setup for the other stuff.
What the blog is called? Locke and Demosthenes?
Demosthenes and Locke. Yeah, there's some ancient philosophers.
Yeah. I know Locke, of course, but I didn't know the other rhetorical guy. I was just like, I was just like, what the fuck? And then the ending, I was just like,
let's talk about the ending.
I'm not going to spoil it, but I was just like, this twist didn't surprise me.
Yeah, absolutely. Even when I was 15 or however old, and I read this, I wasn't like surprised by the ending. But I think it's kind of the point. Like that's one of the things I was planning to reply when you say this, because I was sure he's gonna say this. I feel like it's progressively more and more obvious, and. But I think on purpose, and I think the character also knows, and everybody knows, but nobody wants to admit it, and everybody is trying to pretend it's not happening. It's just to protect themselves from.
But I don't believe it as a believable kind of twist.
Well, that's what I'm trying to explain. Like, it's not a twist. Like, I think Ender knew the whole time, but he didn't want to know. Like, he didn't want to let himself know, because he knew that if he knew, that he wouldn't be able to do
this. This is so disappointing. All right.
But anyway, let's just wrap up this like non-spoiler section so we can talk very openly. But before we do, I wanted to quickly just sum up like what is this series I keep talking about. So the original, I think the only thing you have to know is the 4 books, which are basically a trilogy, which basically is 2 books. So there's Ender's Game, which is to me very short, very simple story. Then there is Speaker for the Dead, which is to me very surprising, very clever. Then there is Xenocide and Children of the Mind, which is like the end of this. I'd recommend reading just that.
Okay.
And then after that, there is a bunch of other books. This is the Ender Saga. There's 8 books, only about Ender. And then there is a Shadow series, which follows Bean. He's one of the characters in the in this book. And it's the same. So the first book is the same story, but from his perspective. And most people say after they have read this that it's so much better than the Ender's Game. And you should start with this book, which I didn't want to do because this is the famous book I want to talk about. And also, it's so much longer and there's so much going on. It's like twice as long, I think, the first book.
I see.
It's called Ender's Shadow. And then that spawned the whole series about other characters. It's 6 books. And then he wrote a prequel with Mazer Rackham and the first and second Formic Wars.
That sounds more interesting, actually.
Like 2 trilogies, which I also read and I loved it. I had like a lot of alien dreams about alien nightmares about it. I always get alien nightmares killing me when I read these books. That's how simple-minded I am, just to clarify.
I'd say the one character that did interest me in this book was Mazer Rackham.
You'll get much
I was
more.
I want to know more about this guy and the buggers, but I don't give a shit about the fucking kid.
You should just watch the scene in the movie where Mazer Rackham beats Ender.
Yeah, that's cathartic. I'd love to see that.
Just watch this scene and you'll be feeling a little better. So other than these, there's comic books and movies and video games. I want to quickly mention there is a video game that nobody knows about called Advent Rising, which is basically Ender's Game. It's really old now, but I really liked it when it came out.
It's like an Advent Rising?
Yeah, it's super old. It's like a simple action game, but I really like the designs and it's good. Like if you want a video game that's Ender's Game, like the feel of the characters, he wrote the story, he directed it, and he helped like make the video game. It's dumb action. Like I'm sure Paul would hate it so hard. But I loved it, and if you love Ender's Game, I think this game I would recommend.
It's well reviewed on Steam, actually. I'm checking it now.
It's just supposed to be a trilogy, and he was supposed to write the story for it. There's supposed to be books, but it flopped, and nobody cared. That was so sad. And it's like a big cliffhanger when the game ends, and I was like, oh my god, and it never happened.
It's like Damned and Doomed. Okay.
Yeah. And then there is The Lone Echo for VR, only available on Oculus, which I played a little bit. I really liked. It was like the first well-made story VR game when the Oculus first came out. And it's basically Ender's Game, like the battle school. You have a multiplayer arena. This looks exactly like the movie, and you can play the Ender's Game battle school.
Be bored out of my fucking mind for 4 hours. Great.
And there is a story which doesn't have anything to do with Ender's Game, but it's like the motion in space and all this is inspired heavily by this. I'd recommend it too. It's a pretty good game for VR, like story game.
All right.
So just for Paul's information, the Ender's Game won both the Hugo Award and the Nebula Award.
I think those awards are overrated nowadays, actually.
At the time, it was a big deal. And the next year after that, the speaker for that came out 1 year later and also won both of the awards, Hugo Award, Nebula Award. So just for Paul's information.
How are those awards decided? Do you have any idea? Is it voted by like a peer of writers or something like that? Or no idea?
There's a committee and somebody decides. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Like I don't take it as bullshit. Like I kind of take the Oscars whatever.
It's completely bullshit. Yeah.
Every time there is a Hugo, Nebula Award, whatever book award, like many of the books on this podcast, I can see why they chose it. I
thought you had issues. Was it you or Pablo who had issues with the Broken Earth trilogy?
Yeah, I love the Broken Earth. Like the more removed I am from reading it, the more I like it.
Pablo didn't. Though. You sounded like you fucking hated it.
Yeah, he hates it. I liked it better than the Stormlight Archive super fantasy saga we're gonna talk about. So last thing I'll say before we'll move on to spoilers is that I'm kind of very torn and like I didn't believe I would say this, but I don't think I recommend this book.
Yeah,
anymore.
I just wanted to ask you actually. Like, I just feel like on especially something like Goodreads, where the books I like and recommend are quite kind of low rated, and this book that I wouldn't recommend to anybody is like what 4.3. Why is it so loved?
Yeah, that's another thing I meant to say. It's the most highest rated and the most popular book by far on this podcast. And I think it's the most mainstream of anything that Orson Scott Card has ever written. And he said himself in many interviews, he wanted to make a buck by writing a mainstream book and be famous and then have the space to be creative and do whatever he wants. And
I get it.
Respect him for that. That's what he did.
I get it. But why the love for this book? I just don't get it.
All the points we talked about, people want in a story, and you don't want. They want a character that's easily relatable. They want a dumb, dull, simple story to follow. They want the action that's like redundant, and they want like a simple character to follow and a simple character arc, a predictable twist they can predict and feel clever about. They want these things. Like the mass audience, mainstream audience, they want these things. Okay, so to finish this section, please don't cut this part. I'm going to say, breaks my heart. This is my most beloved book series ever, but I don't recommend this book after having reread it. And that is To You and Me and grumpy old, not men, but like elderly, not elderly, but like older people.
Gen X.
Like when I was like younger than 30, I'll say. I loved it, and now I still love it, but I don't like see that somebody who's like our age reading it would love it.
No.
But if you have somebody who's young, I think they'd still love it. Like I'll never forget, I had a friend, my best friend, who's probably listening. Hi Peter, in elementary school, and I read this in elementary school, and I was talking to him every week, and I was like, "Fucking underfigure, this is the shit. I must have to read this." And my friend was like, "Fuck off, I don't care. Just screw that." And I read the second book. I was like, "What the fuck was that? I don't understand this book, but it's amazing." And I was like, "Fuck off! It is entering." And I was like, the whole series. Every time I read the book, I was like, "You have to talk. It's amazing." And then in high school again, I was like, "Yeah, this audiobook adaptation." I came back and I reread the whole series. Oh my fucking god! And he was like, "Shut up!" And then one day, I don't know, you were like. He could have been like 25, and he was like, "Yeah, I read it. I read the Ender's Game." I was like, "What? What did you think?" And he said, "I love it." And I read the second book, and I already reading the third book, and he read the whole series, and he was like, "This is awesome. I love it." And I read the whole thing, and he read the Shadow series too, like, and he never read many books, and he never got into it. So there is something for the mainstream that people want. Like, it's not what we want on this podcast, but there is something in this book that
I think
enjoy.
if I was like 13 or 14, I probably would have liked this book. In between reading like Silence of the Lambs and something else, it's like, ooh, something lighter.
Like Orson said in an interview that this was supposed to be like for children. He intended his children to read this. So I'd say this is a very good book to get children into reading. This is my point, my perspective.
Fair enough.
And this is how I got into reading. So that's why I like it.
I got in reading by reading Silence of the Lambs. That's why I think Haunted is light fiction. Anyway.
Spoiler section. Let's tear this shit apart. So I'm gonna like super short sum this up. It's very simple, and then we'll talk about, I'm sure, many issues you have. So the story starts with a boy, Andrew, and he has a monitor, so they're watching him, and he's a genius. He's been bred. He's been genetically modified to be a genius to fight the alien invasion in the future.
Buggers.
The buggers. That's the only thing we know about them. Which I liked. Like when I was reading it, I didn't know what they are, what it means, and I like the part that they don't say anything about them. Because they never met them in person. They just fought them in spaceships. They never saw anything. Like, why would we know what they look like or what they are like? It's just a war.
I thought the kids were playing with like playing kind of like with a mask and one.
Yeah, but we don't know what it is. Like, they just made a mask. Like, it's just the bad guys, and we don't know nothing. And I think that was a good choice. So basically, they're having these genius children grow up, and they're trying to find one for a battle school to train like the best commander to defend Earth from the alien invasion. And they have this theory that they need to train these children as young as possible so they can think in a different way. Like we talked about the gravity and all this stuff, and they can make the best commander, and they can just have them control the army. So Ender gets in a bunch of shenanigans. They remove his monitor. He kills a bunch of people. He becomes a commander.
You've skipped so far ahead.
Yeah. I'm just trying to not have
No. I want you to bring it up so I can complain about it.
So no complaints so far. So let's just start before he goes into battle school. This part.
He's got a brother and a sister as well, and he's quite close to the sister. I gather from that.
Yeah.
That's the only emotional point I could gather from the whole story.
Well, the thing about him is he has no emotion, no connection with anybody, except the only person who's ever been nice was the sister.
True. Yes.
And it makes complete sense to me, because the brother is sour that he wasn't chosen as the commander. He's older, stronger, and a bastard.
Well, yeah, there was actually one interesting point that they raised as well, that the brother was raised too... Well, he was genetically bred like too hard, like a Jekyll, like a complete monster. Yeah. And then the second child was a daughter or a girl, was too soft. So that's why they had Ender somewhere kind of in between. And that was probably the only point of the book that I actually liked. It's like, oh, that's interesting. The brother is a complete psychopath. The sister is this kindly kind of girl, and there's just
both characters are very much elaborated on in the sequels, and I love them. Like they're very we had these like throughout the book we get these conversations about the management of the international fleet, the IS, and they keep saying we need a compassionate, you need a compassionate monster. Like they're trying to breed a person who's both compassionate for the soldiers and the army, but has to be the most vicious killer.
So that's Enter, basically. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, so that makes sense.
Okay. So he's recruited by the IS. Is this?
Yeah, the International Fleet IS. Oh,
IF.
sorry.
Okay.
Before he gets recruited, he beats a child into submission, almost killing them to show that he shouldn't be messed with. Yeah.
It's later revealed that he's killed a kid. Yeah. So.
Which imagine my naive, like 15-year-old self. I was reading this and I was like. This he almost killed him, and this makes complete sense. This is what he had to do because he had to show them that he.
The shit I was reading at 12 it doesn't bother me. Anyway, so
I also love the part where his monitor is removed, so he cannot be protected. And when they are removing it, he's like, "Is this going to hurt?" And they're like, "Yeah, probably a little bit." And he says, "At least sometimes lies are more reliable than the truth," which really stuck with me when I was reading it, like the first time.
Okay.
Because then he gets basically tortured. It's so painful to remove the monitor from him. And it gets like brought up in the story. Many times people lie to him openly and he can use it well, which I thought was very clever, but apparently not so much.
Yeah. I mean, it does start off well. I mean, it starts off intriguing, but it loses me very quickly. But anyway, continue. Sorry.
So he gets recruited in the battle school, and the commanders make the most effort to make him the target of everything. They want to make him separated, hated, and pressured, and put him in such a place that he would become the most self-sufficient, clear-thinking, able to deal with problems himself and make decisions under pressure very well.
Yes, that's very clearly set out, but it's done in a way that it's just very repetitive, I felt. So. They make it very clear at this point, and
yes, everything in this book is very clear. So they battle in this arena, which is in zero gravity, and they fly around these stars and they shoot each other with guns that freezes their suit, and they have to come up with these strategies. So they have like teams and they have like these leaderboards.
How many times do they play this game?
Yeah, and I liked it each time because each time they brought a new element in the game.
Anything special? It was just the same thing with a different element, but it was so...
Yeah, but that was the point. Like he was learning... Each battle, he was learning a new point about strategy in general, which I like.
So hard to get through.
So he goes from being nobody to learning how to move in zero gravity and controlling the teams and all that. You have to go into the details.
But he is someone from the start. He's sort of like hacking the computers and dealing with the bullies and...
Yeah, I didn't think that was
okay.
a deal. But yeah.
All right. But he always wins. He never loses the game, does he?
Yes, which in the movie he does lose the game. They changed that.
Okay. Well done, Hollywood. You've done something correct.
So he meets all these characters and we get like a rehash. I guess this is why our board is repeating. There's this character called
Bernard.
Bonzo,
the Spanish guy, Bonzo.
So he has to serve under him and he's trying to assert dominance like the real alpha male. But Ender can't have this.
No, of course not. No.
So they have a confrontation and Ender keeps having these thoughts about being like Peter because he hates Peter for being a killer.
Peter's the older brother, yes.
And long story short, he ends up killing Bonzo Madrid.
But you should explain how they have a fight. These prepubescent boys who are naked in the shower beat each other up.
Yep, that's it. Steamy and sweaty and hot, and they climb all over each other.
Jesus fucking Christ!
Which I didn't care about. Like
I was just like, what the fuck is this?
I like the fights. Like all the fights that happen here are short, to the point, and make complete sense. Even the beginning.
It's true, but I mean, when I thought about it in retrospect, I was just like two 10-year-old boys just like beat each other up naked in the shower.
Yeah, but they're not really boys, are they? They're basically like weirdly old, weirdly clever, weirdly self-aware men in a children's body that don't have any experience.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I think as well. Like I had trouble with there's still kind of childish kids in the way they talk to each other and stuff as well.
Yeah, and that's very much the point they make themselves in the book, that it's so weird that these children are so much more like adults and they're still children at the same time. Dune reference.
I know what you're talking about.
You'll know how they are and such. Well, anyway, Oh.
Continue on. So the battle school. Yes. And there's a genius.
Yeah, they keep doing. He keeps climbing the ranks, and he keeps trying to win over. Which I really like this. Like even now when I reread it, it wasn't boring to me. Like how he tries to make friends and how he tries to get into a position where people respect him, even though they hate him, and how he would have to command an army where you're like the most improbable person of being the leader of the army. I don't think it's bad. Like it's not amazingly clever.
Yeah, I want to say I don't hate the book. I just didn't find it particularly.
You hate it. I can see it.
No, I think maybe my expectation was a little high because it's so reviewed, and it's just really underwhelming.
I think everything we're talking about here is just being drowned by mainstream. This is very much mainstream entertainment. We don't do this on this podcast. Like this is as much mainstream as we're gonna ever get. I dare to say on this podcast.
So anyway, he rises up through the ranks, and then he gets shipped off to commander school or something before,
like a different planet.
After he reunites with his sister for briefly.
Yeah, he gets a short holiday because he's got a bunch of mental breakdowns. He's beaten left and right, mentally, physically. He doesn't have any good relationships. It's the most pressure you could ever put on a person. And then he gets a few days to chill out on a lake with his sister. And then he gets shipped into this other planet. They don't tell him anything about anything. And he starts training with this character, Mazer Rackham.
Yes, but before we get to that, the sister and the older brother, they start off on their own little kind of plot. Can you tell us a little bit about that and my complaint about it?
His brother Peter, so he's hungry for power and he wants to get influence. And I don't know if it's already here, but he starts thinking about what would happen after the war is over. Is it here or not yet?
I think so. Maybe so.
So he's already thinking like 7 steps forward. Like all these children, basically geniuses, and they're always trying to look at plans within plans within plans. Dune reference. And then he starts a blog and he starts like writing opinions and commentary and influential. Just he's trying to be a voice online.
And his sister is doing like a kind of a counter argument to him. Yes.
Yeah. And his sister is like, I can't have this because he's such a bastard and I have to do something. So I'm gonna do like another character who's gonna also comment on this. It's gonna be the counter argument. And he's going to think that I'm helping him by showing him that he's got a point and I'm going to support him and help him write it better. But at the same time, what I'm really gonna be doing is making sure that he's not going to destroy the world and become a psychopathic tyrant dictator. So they write these articles, and there's not much told about that in this book.
No, I just thought the premise was kind of ridiculous, but like a bunch of 12 or 14-year-old children taking over the world. I'm like, so Orson Scott Card predicted TikTok. Okay, well done.
So this is the Shadow series. Peter's got a big role in that. Yeah, after this book, Ender's gone. Like, it's never like in this timeline. But Peter and Valentine and all these characters, it's the Shadow series.
I'm more interested in Peter because he seems like a complete lunatic.
Peter's awesome in the books. Yeah, there's a big deal about Peter and Bean in the Shadow series. They meet and stuff.
So after the sabbatical on the lake.
So tell me, we keep saying how predictable this is. So when did you realize the twist at this point?
I think when he got to the was it like the commando school or is it?
Yeah, this place with Ray's.
Yeah.
So as soon as he got there.
After that training, I thought, okay, and he's doing these war games. It's like, well, it wasn't. I didn't predict it, but when it came, it wasn't like a huge shock. It's just like, okay,
yeah. And I think, like I said, I don't want to repeat myself, but I think that was intended. Like, even when I read it as a child or as a teenager, I knew subconsciously what's happening, but I didn't want to admit it. And then when it admits it, you're like, okay. It's like the feeling you get from this plot twist is not, wow, what the hell? The feeling is like, okay. Yeah. And I think that's the point.
But we've kind of missed explaining to the audience what actually happens.
Yeah, of course. So they keep training, and instead of doing the zero gravity fights with these armies, he is now controlling ships in a simulator, and he's told that Mazer Rackham is fighting him to train him against the buggers. And it escalates, and he bites his fists until he bleeds, and he's got nightmares, and everybody has mental breakdowns, and he kept communicating with his friends, and they keep just learning how to be better commanders. And like we already said, they're already fighting in the war, but they are not told they are fighting in the war. And then we get the final battle where they use this little doctor weapon. So it's called Little Doctor because it's a molecular disruption device, MD device.
Medical doctor, yes.
And so it's the Little Doctor. And this device works in a way that when it touches matter, the matter disrupts, and when the disruption, like the chain reaction, touches more matter, it keeps going. So when the ships are close enough together, whole thing just blows up. Not really blows up, but disintegrates into rubble. And I like the description in some of the battles. They say there was so much rubble that it kept expanding and getting more stuff, and then all the rubble kept just contracting because of gravity, and it just ended up being a bunch of crap.
Yeah, I did like that kind of description, how he talks about that. 1 point.
So we get the final battle where so they keep like upping the stakes, and there are more enemies, and Petra, one of the main characters, she has to be just excused because she can't deal with the pressure anymore. And then they have like a small army because they had suffered a lot of losses, and they arrive at the home planet of the buggers, and the army is just 1,000 ships to one. They cannot do anything, and everybody's watching Ender play it, and he's like supposedly doing the final graduation to become the commander, but he doesn't know he's already fighting the war. But I think he knows. I think he knew the whole time. Like during this, he's getting dreams, and we skipped my favorite part about the mind game, but never mind. I'll just finish the plot. So he keeps getting these dreams, and he's not comfortable with destroying everything and the home world of the buggers. But he has to, because that's the only way he could accomplish anything in this fight, because he would just be obliterated. So what he does is that he shoots the Little Doctor at the planet itself, which is so much matter that it causes a chain reaction that completely obliterates the whole fleet, most of his fleet, all of their fleet, the whole planet, everything is just a bunch of rubble. And that's how it ends.
And he takes the queen.
Yeah, so that's the next step. So he's told that it was real, and everybody has a breakdown. And everybody freaks out about it, which is very redundant, I guess.
Why did they have to use like a child genius to destroy a whole bugger planet? Why couldn't they just get Gary the janitor to press the button?
Because of the strategy. They keep explaining all these battles one by one to explain why they have to come up with all these strategies. Like every single battle, he had to come up with something. They make a point of the enemy learns immediately what you did, so you can't do it again. You have to come up with new stuff. And you have to control so many things so quickly at the same time. And they also make a point I like very much that the commanders under the hierarchy should have their own deciding power. And it only works if they can decide quickly enough. So if he controls everything, he will lose the battle because he will be predictable. So he has to divide and conquer with sections of the armies. So everybody has to have their own strategy. And everybody has to communicate very quickly and make decisions very fast and consider everything very quickly and play it like a quick video game.
Wouldn't like someone who's like kind of war hardened, like commander, like know this kind of thing?
But he wouldn't be able to break the rules and like use the rules of the game against the opponent. Like they keep making, like that's why this whole setup with the boring battle school games you didn't like. Like it's setting up the fact that every single battle he has to do something to interrupt the enemy strategy or come up with something else or reconsider what he's doing and how he's doing it.
Like what's the army been doing for the past 30 years? Haven't they been training people to be more like kind of quick on their feet with like decision making and things like this?
But it's not the quickness of the decision making. It's more like the going against the like thinking outside of the box and whatever.
But
like
kids. All right. Well,
so all these things are the answer to your question. Like thinking in zero gravity, having a quick deciding power, quick mind, thinking about new things, how to break the rules, how to like all the stuff they talk about is used in the actual confrontation. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah, the way you explain it, I'm like, okay, but I just didn't buy it.
An older person who grew up in the army on Earth and even in space and practiced things, like he doesn't have the ability to quickly come up with completely new, out of the blue strategies that somehow break a thing that's a current problem. Like they made a point out of it when they were training in the battle school. Like he froze his knees to make it a shield. Yeah. He just flew in the gate. He used the rope to like swing around in like zero gravity to change the directions like unexpected. Do things that the enemy will never expect because that's the only thing you can use against them, and they're so much more numbers.
I get it, but I just don't buy it. So really, are adults that Like we're so incapable of thinking outside the box, even through rigid training.
Well, obviously, they can do that, but their point was to just from the very beginning how they grew up, and also they're supposed to be much more clever than adults because they were bred to be geniuses. The people who already are alive, they are not the genetically engineered super brain people.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay, anyway, let me finish this up, and I have to talk about my favorite part and the ending, the second ending. So very short. There's a mind game he keeps playing to learn about himself, and then learn about him how he's going to react with rejection, failure, all this stuff. So he plays this game, learns from him, and he puts like aspects of his subconscious in the game, and he breaks it. And then he has all these dreams when he's actually fighting the buggers, and the queen is speaking to him into dreams, but only with pictures, which I really like, that there is no language. Like the aliens, when he talks to them at one point. I don't know if it's in this book, but in some of the other books. But they make a point out
They
of...
don't talk to him in this one.
Well, mild spoiler. I think they maybe did it in the movie, because I just watched it. But the aliens literally say with pictures that they were so surprised that chaotic human beings who think in dreams are capable of doing something productive. And the only way they considered the creatures like people would be able to understand them is via dreams. Because everything they say and think and do is just imaginary. And they never say what they do, and they never like all lying and such. So they have to talk to them only in dreams, because that's the only way they will understand what the buggers want to say.
No, it's definitely not in this book.
And they would explain this concept without speaking, which was very fascinating to me. So yeah, that's basically it. So the alien queen got into Ender's mind, and first she tried to break him, showing him nightmares. Then she tried to do all kinds of stuff, and then when she knew she would lose, she learned from him his like most vivid dream memory imagery place, which is like this part of the game where he broke the game. And then later, after it's all done, he goes to a new colony because people want to repopulate the worlds that are now free of the buggers. So they send ships faster than light into far away places to start new colonies on new planets. And one of the planets is a bugger world, and so Ender leaves because Earth is already in turmoil, starting fights about who's gonna take the generals and who's gonna have the upper hand in Earth politics, and who's gonna use these geniuses to win their wars on Earth. So Ender's just like, fuck that, I'm leaving. And he's going to a different colony. And in that colony, he walks around and he finds the place from the game built up. And it's the place where he killed like a giant.
there's ribs or something.
Yeah, because in the game, he broke the game by killing like a character that wasn't supposed to be killed. And he finds like a structure that looks like the giant. So he goes inside of it, and inside the game, he finds exactly what he dreamed about. Both when he would play the game a long time ago, and then with the dreams with the queen. And he finds a cocoon of the last supposedly living queen of the buggers. So he takes it. That's
and he's going to try to find a new world or something for the queen or something, because he has sympathy.
So here's your setup
for the other bugs or something. I was going to say species.
So this whole book we just talked about was supposed to be 20 pages at the start of the speaker.
Yeah, you should have kept it like that.
And then he decided to. I was waiting for us to say that. So he was deciding to. He decided to make it into the book. Yeah. So if you want to know where that goes, we can talk about Speaker for the Dead. It's not long, but maybe I should read it first and tell you if it's worth it, because it's been a long time since I read it.
How many pages is that, do you think?
I think it's the same. None of these books are very long. It's like 200,
This felt
300.
long.
I was about to say, this book is 324 pages, and I remembered it as one of the shortest books I've ever read. And once again, when I read it now, it was feeling very short to me. Like, it just flies by because I like it. So I felt like it's very
power
short.
through it.
Sorry.
It's fine.
Well, I hope you got something out of it. How do you feel about the whole thing they keep beating you over the head with? You have to learn to love an enemy to be able to destroy it.
What was the message of that, do you think?
Well, I like that very much. It makes complete sense that if you want to have control over something or understand something fully to be able to destroy it, you inevitably gonna have a relationship with it.
That's
And
true.
you're inevitably gonna have a very strong feeling about it. And the more you take control over it, and the more you know about it, and the more you have power over it, the more you love it.
Why
And
would
if
I
you
want
do
to
it-
destroy it, though?
Exactly. And that's the exact point. And then it's the hardest to destroy it, and it's the only time where you can really and fully destroy it. And that's the point of this book, which I like very much.
It just wasn't entertaining.
When you were reading this, I was thinking about it, and I was sure you're gonna not like this.
Okay.
But I was hoping you'd find some fun in it.
I didn't hate it.
Unfortunately, you didn't find any fun.
No, there's parts of it I thought, as I said, the blogging thing became interesting, but I didn't understand the point of it. It's just the middle section was so hard to get through. The constant training. That was a grind. That was my issue with it.
It all makes sense. I agree.
Written in a way that, like, well, he's clearly not a military guy, I think, as well. And he's written kind of military people in a very, they seem like, yeah, they are very stereotypical. So, I don't know.
It is true. This book is very, I wrote a note, it's very vanilla.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the book that made me think of the stereotype of the commanders from the army. This is the book that set up the stereotypes from the army. Yes, and the Starship Troopers are very much the opposite.
Yeah.
Yes.
So.
Which the Starship Troopers is for adults. This is just for
fun.
It's funny you keep pointing out all the parts that are like the points of the series, and not like the more we talk about it, the more I feel like this is just an excuse to have the series happen.
Okay.
Like when I read the series, I never came back to this book. I never thought about this very much.
Okay.
I always thought about the other stuff, but I never thought about. I was like, okay, battles happened. that was my memory of this book. I was like, I remember loving the anime. I like that part. I remember the anime gate is down and the gravity stuff. I remember like pieces. I love the mind game, but I didn't really like think about the story. And there are 8 books in the end of the series, and I read 7. And the 8th one came out last year, so I have to read that one at least.
Okay.
I think this book was for me like life lessons to a child book.
Fair enough.
Time.
Yeah.
That's why I like it so much.
Okay.
So we'll see in the future, listeners, if you're gonna ever talk about any other book from the series. And thank you so much, Paul, for doing this, indulging me in my favorite book.
Well, that's fine. I mean, it's good to read things that are new. And as I said, I've known about this series, and I was happy I read it.
Thanks for saying this.
I'm not sure how much further I'll go into this.
I'm not sure I believe it.
I didn't hate it. I'll make that clear.
I'm definitely,
It wasn't a book that I'm going to hate on. Not at all. But
okay.
I'm sure people will hate me for saying that it wasn't a great book. But anyway, that's fine.
Paul looks sweaty, hair everywhere. It's like suffering.
It's just hot in this room. It's fine.
No, it's the discussion about this book.
That's over.
So thanks so much again.
Final comment. I mean, if you never read any of these books, The Ender Game or Orson Scott Card, check it out. You might like it. I mean, it's not for everyone, I guess. Nothing is. And you might be pleasantly surprised. I wasn't. Anyway.
Read it to your kids. That's my advice.
Yeah. I think if I was a 13-year-old and I finished reading Silence of the Lambs, I'd probably enjoy this.
Read it to your kids and then read the sequel yourself. That's my take on this.
Yeah, sure, definitely. Yeah. Until next time.
Thanks for sticking it out.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Please rate us on Audible and Apple Podcasts. Maybe even leave a review. In the upcoming episodes, we're planning Piranesi by Suzanne Clark. And of course, Stormlight Archive. It's going to happen.